Jed Crawley?
I sent him off to look in on Will Donovan's kids.
That's not where he went. He went to the Decker Ranch. Come on, Donovan.
Now, where are you going?
To Al Summers' place ahead off Ed Decker. And I hope we're not too late.
Everyone remembers Tonto, the loyal sidekick who rode beside the Lone Ranger. But how much do you really know about the man behind him? Jay Silverheels became a household name in the 1950s as the first Native American actor to find real mainstream success, but his life off-camera was far from that of the hero the world adored. Now, 70 years later, his family is breaking their silence and confessing the dark truth that Hollywood never wanted you to hear. So what did his children reveal, and why are they only speaking up now? Join us as we get into all the details. The real story of Jay Silverheels, from Mohawk roots to Hollywood legend. Jay Silverheels became a household name in the 1950s as one of the first Native American actors to break into mainstream Hollywood. But his story began long before the cameras ever rolled. Born Harold J. Smith on the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve near Hagersville, Ontario, Jay's life was shaped by deep roots and strong heritage. He was the grandson of Mohawk Chief A.G. Smith and Mary Wedge, and one of 11 children born to Captain Alexander George Edwin Smith and Mabel Phoebe Dockstader. His father carried Cayuga blood, while his mother came from Mohawk and Seneca lines, a mix of courage and pride that ran through every generation of their family. His father was a decorated soldier, wounded while fighting in some of World War I's bloodiest battles, Somme and Ypres. Jay was just 4 years old at the time, watching his father return home not just as a hero, but as a man who had stared death in the face and survived. Later, his father went on to train Polish-American recruits for the Blue Army in France, stationed at Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario. That kind of strength and discipline left its mark on young Jay. Before Hollywood ever came calling, Jay Silverheels was already making a name for himself, not on screen but on the field. He was a natural-born athlete, fierce and focused, and lacrosse became his first stage. In 1931, when the owners of NHL teams in Toronto and Montreal decided to introduce indoor lacrosse, or box lacrosse, to keep their arenas alive during summer, Jay jumped right in. Playing under the name Harry Smith, he became one of the first players chosen to represent the Toronto Tecumsehs. And he didn't stop there. Alongside his brothers and cousin Russell, who everyone called Beef, Sid, nicknamed Porky, and George, better known as Chubby, he hit the road. The Silverheels boys played all across North America in the North American Amateur Lacrosse Association, with stints in Buffalo, Rochester, Atlantic City, and Akron throughout the 1930s. For a time, Jay even called Buffalo, New York, home, but his hunger for challenge never faded. He wasn't just an athlete, he was a fighter in every sense. In 1938, he stepped into the boxing ring at Madison Square Garden, where he competed in the Golden Gloves tournament and placed second in the middleweight class. It was another victory, another reminder that no matter the field or the fight, Jay Silverheels was built to rise. Years later, his athletic spirit and commanding presence would carry him all the way to Hollywood, where he transformed into Tonto, a character that made him an icon. But behind the fame, his journey remained rooted in the same values he grew up with: discipline, heritage, and strength. In 1997, long after his passing, Jay Silverheels was honored with induction into the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame, a fitting tribute to the man who had been more than just a screen legend. He was a trailblazer, an athlete, and a proud representative of his people. The rise of Jay Silverheels, how a lacrosse player became Hollywood's legendary Tonto. Jay Silverheels went from an athlete on the lacrosse field to one of Hollywood's most recognizable Native American faces. His journey wasn't planned, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was unforgettable. It all started in 1937, when Jay, then still known as Harold J. Smith, was playing box lacrosse in Los Angeles. During one of his games, his athleticism caught the attention of actor Joe E. Brown, who was so impressed that he urged Jay to take a chance and do a screen test. That one suggestion changed everything. That same year, Jay found himself stepping into a completely different world, the movies. He began as an extra and a stuntman, working under names like Harold Smith and Harry Smith. The pay was modest, the hours long, but he was learning, watching, and adapting. And somewhere along the way, the athlete known for his speed and grace on the field adopted a new name, Jay Silverheels, the nickname he had earned during his lacrosse days. It stuck, and soon it would become legendary. By the 1940s, Silverheels was slowly carving out a place for himself in Hollywood. He started landing roles in bigger films, first in I Am an American in 1944, and then in major productions alongside some of the biggest names of the era. He appeared in Captain from Castile with Tyrone Power in 1947, Key Largo with Humphrey Bogart in 1948, and Lust for Gold with Glenn Ford in 1949. By 1950, he starred alongside James Stewart in Broken Arrow, a film that would help shape his reputation as one of the few Native American actors who could bring real dignity and depth to indigenous characters. The momentum did not stop there. He went on to appear in War Arrow with Maureen O'Hara and Jeff Chandler in 1953, The Black Dakotas in 1954, Drums Across the River that same year, and Walk the Proud Land with Audie Murphy and Anne Bancroft in 1956. He even worked with comedy legend Bob Hope in Alias Jesse James in 1959, and later with Johnny Crawford in Indian Paint in 1964. His face became familiar, his presence steady, but his biggest break came when he landed the role that would define his legacy: Tonto, the faithful partner to the Lone Ranger. From 1949 to 1957, the Lone Ranger series made Jay Silverheels a household name. He reprised the role in two film adaptations, The Lone Ranger in 1956 and The Lone Ranger and the Lost City of Gold in 1958, solidifying his place in pop culture forever. But fame came with its own struggles. After the series ended, Jay found himself typecast in native roles such as warriors, chiefs, and scouts, the same stereotypes Hollywood could not seem to move past. Still, he kept working. In 1960, he appeared as a Native American firefighter in Rescue 8, and in 1966, he took on a guest role in The Rounders, a short-lived comedy western. He also turned his experiences into art. Jay began writing poetry inspired by his upbringing on the Six Nations Reserve and even recited his work on television. He was not just an actor, he was a storyteller, keeping his culture and voice alive through words when Hollywood would not give him the chance. Even with all his success, Silverheels never lost his sense of humor. He started to poke fun at his Tonto character in later years. In 1969, he appeared on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, performing a comedy sketch as Tonto, this time with a twist. He joked, "My name is Tonto. I hail from Toronto and I speak Esperanto." A rare moment of levity from a man who had spent decades carrying the weight of Hollywood's expectations. He even took the joke further, appearing in commercials that parodied his old role, one for Chevrolet in 1970 and another for Gino's Pizza Rolls alongside Clayton Moore, his old co-star who played the Lone Ranger. The iconic William Tell Overture theme blared in the background, a nostalgic wink to their television days. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Jay continued to work steadily. He made appearances on Daniel Boone, Love, American Style, The Brady Bunch, and even Dusty's Trail, reuniting briefly with Bob Denver of Gilligan's Island fame. His last few film roles came in 1973, first in Santee alongside Glenn Ford, and then in The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing, where he played a wise, white-haired chief, closing out his career with grace. But Jay's impact reached far beyond his screen credits. In the early 1960s, he helped establish the Indian Actors Workshop in Echo Park, Los Angeles, a space where Native American actors could train, find community, and build confidence in an industry that rarely made room for them. That same workshop still exists today, continuing the mission Jay started decades ago. Jay Silverheels was not just Tonto. He was an athlete, a poet, a pioneer, and a man who broke through barriers with nothing but talent, persistence, and heart. His story reminds us that behind every iconic role is a person, one who fought to be seen, respected, and remembered for more than the mask they wore. And even now, all these years later, his spirit still rides, not just in reruns of The Lone Ranger, but in every native actor who steps into the light, because Jay Silverheels once showed it could be done. The tragic truth behind Tonto, how Jay Silverheels fought Hollywood's stereotypes and changed everything. Me do, Kimo Sabe. Those 4 words became iconic, a catchphrase that echoed through living rooms across America. But few people knew that every time Jay Silverheels, the Mohawk actor behind Tonto, spoke to them, a part of him cringed inside. On screen, he was the loyal, soft-spoken companion of the Lone Ranger. Off-screen, he was a proud indigenous man trapped in the role Hollywood had written for him. In 1949, at just 35 years old, Jay Silverheels made history. He became the first indigenous actor to play a Native American character on television, and in doing so became the symbolic Indian to an entire generation. His face was stoic, his words few, and his presence commanding, the perfect image of what 1950s Hollywood wanted its native characters to be. But behind that calm expression was a man who understood the cost of that image. Before The Lone Ranger, Silverheels had spent years as an extra in westerns, the nameless Indian warrior riding in the background or the silent figure staring into the distance. Slowly, those roles grew into speaking parts, and then came the offer that would change everything. Tonto, the faithful sidekick in the first Western series ever made for television. It was steady work, a big break, and for a newly married man, it felt like a blessing. Silverheels convinced himself it was worth it, that one role could open doors to something better. But Hollywood had other plans. When The Lone Ranger ended after 5 years, Jay found himself boxed into a single image, the stoic, one-dimensional Indian brave. Casting directors could not see past it. No matter how talented he was, no matter how versatile, he was always Tonto. It was a label he could not shake, a mask he could not remove. And it was not just him. Every indigenous actor of that era faced the same narrow path: warriors, squaws, sidekicks, nothing more. Jay Silverheels had enough. He decided that if Hollywood would not change, he would. In 1966, alongside fellow actor Will Sampson, Silverheels founded the Indian Actors Workshop. His mission was simple but revolutionary: to help indigenous actors gain real skills, real roles, and real respect. He opened free nightly classes in the basement of a Los Angeles church, teaching everything from elocution and stunt training to audition techniques and even nutrition. To him, it was not just about acting, it was about empowerment. For years, he poured his time, money, and heart into that workshop, quietly building something lasting. He trained a new generation of indigenous performers, people who would one day carry his torch, step into bigger roles, and rewrite the narrative he had been trapped in. Then tragedy struck. In 1975, Jay suffered a series of strokes that left him partially paralyzed. The illness came at the worst possible time, just when Hollywood was finally beginning to recognize his true talent. After decades of being sidelined, he had started to land major roles again, including Santee, where audiences saw the depth and dignity he had always had within him. But his health continued to decline, and in 1980, the man who had once galloped across screens as Tonto passed away. It was a cruel ending for a man who had spent his life trying to prove that indigenous actors could be more than caricatures. Yet even in death, Jay Silverheels left behind something that Hollywood could not bury: a legacy. Today, that legacy lives on. Actors like Tina Keeper, Michael Horse, Peter Kelly Gaudreau, and Tom Jackson all point to Jay Silverheels as the one who opened the door for them. His courage, his determination, and his refusal to stay silent laid the foundation for a generation of indigenous storytellers, actors, writers, and directors who now control their own narratives. Jay Silverheels may always be remembered as Tonto, but to those who know his real story, he was so much more: a trailblazer who turned typecasting into a fight for representation, and a man whose rebellion forever changed how the world saw indigenous actors. They called him Tonto. But what Jay Silverheels endured off-screen will leave you speechless. Everyone remembers Tonto, the loyal sidekick who rode beside the Lone Ranger through every chase and every gunfight. But behind the mask and the catchphrase, there was a man who carried a much heavier burden than anyone realized. Jay Silverheels made history as the first Native American to ever play a Native character on television. He became a symbol, a household name, and yet, behind the scenes, his reality was far from the hero Hollywood showed on screen. In 1957, when a reporter asked Jay about his most famous role, he gave an answer that stunned everyone. "Tonto is stupid." It was not anger, it was honesty. Those 3 words revealed everything he had been holding in for years. When Jay was cast as Tonto, it felt like a breakthrough. A Native man finally had a major role in one of America's biggest TV shows. To the world, it was progress. But to Jay, it came with a painful price. Behind the cameras, he had no creative control, barely any lines, and zero say in how his character was written. He was paid half of what his white co-star, Clayton Moore, earned, even though he appeared in nearly every single episode. And worse, he was constantly treated as less than equal. Crew members ignored him. Some mocked him. And in one shocking moment, a director actually tried to attack him after he questioned a racist line in the script. The crew stopped it before it went too far, but Jay never forgot it. The message was clear. He was expected to stay quiet. Even the name Tonto haunted him. In Spanish, the word means fool or stupid, and Jay knew that all too well. When he called Tonto stupid in that 1957 interview, he was not mocking the role. He was telling the truth about how Hollywood viewed him and his people. Off-screen, Jay Silverheels carried himself with quiet pride. He was Mohawk, dignified, grounded, and proud of his heritage. But Hollywood rarely gave him the chance to show that strength. When the cameras stopped rolling, Native actors were offered the same shallow roles: warriors, savages, or silent shadows standing behind white leads. Jay often dreamed of playing something more: a father, a teacher, a man with heart and depth, but those scripts never came. Still, he refused to let that stop him. When The Lone Ranger ended, Jay turned his pain into purpose. He started mentoring young Native actors, teaching them to face the same industry that had once humiliated him. In 1966, he founded the Indian Actors Workshop in Los Angeles, one of the first programs dedicated to helping indigenous performers build real careers in film and television. He held free nightly classes in a church basement, teaching everything from audition skills and elocution to stunt training and confidence. For the first time, Native actors had a place to belong, a safe space where they could speak freely, learn, and prepare for the kind of roles Jay had been denied. But while he was helping others find their voices, Jay quietly battled his own pain. Friends remembered him as gentle but guarded, funny but often sad. He struggled to find meaningful roles after The Lone Ranger, trapped by the same typecasting he had fought so hard against. Casting agents only saw Tonto, and when he auditioned for new roles, they told him to talk like an Indian, the broken English written by white writers who had never met one. It crushed him. At one point, he confided to a friend, "They love Tonto, but they don't love me." Still, Jay never gave up. He used his fame for something bigger than himself. During the 1960s and 1970s, as Native activism began to rise across America, he supported the movement quietly but firmly. He spoke at schools and community events, telling young Native people that their stories mattered, even if Hollywood refused to tell them right. By the time Jay grew older, the world was beginning to shift. People started to look back at The Lone Ranger differently, not just as a beloved classic, but as a reflection of an era that needed to change. Jay never condemned the show publicly, but those who knew him said he hoped one day Tonto would be remembered not as a stereotype, but as the start of something, the first crack in a wall that had kept indigenous people invisible for too long. When Jay Silverheels passed away in 1980, tributes poured in from across the entertainment world. Many praised him as a trailblazer, the man who gave a face to Native representation in Hollywood. But those who truly knew him understood his real legacy was not Tonto. His real legacy was courage, the kind it takes to stand tall in a world determined to make you small. Inside Jay Silverheels' private life, the truth about his marriages and children. Jay Silverheels. Personal life tells a quieter, more human story filled with love, heartbreak, and family. His first marriage was to a woman named Bobby Smith. Not much is known about when they tied the knot, but what is clear is that their time together did not last. The two eventually went their separate ways in 1943. From that marriage, Jay became a father for the first time to a son named Steve, who carried his father's strength and charm. 2 years later, in 1945, Jay found love again, this time with Mary DeRoma. It was a new beginning for him, one that brought stability, warmth, and the family life he had been missing through his early years in Hollywood. Together, Jay and Mary built a home that was full of love, laughter, and children. In total, Jay Silverheels had 6 children, 2 sons and 4 daughters. Steve from his first marriage, and then Jay Anthony Jr., Marilyn, Gail, Pamela, and Karen from his second. Among them, Jay Anthony Jr. followed most closely in his father's footsteps, stepping into the world of acting and continuing the Silverheels legacy on screen. But family was always more than fame for Jay. No matter how much recognition he gained from Hollywood, his real pride came from being a father, from watching his children grow and knowing they carried his strength, his resilience, and his heritage with them. Through the ups and downs of 2 marriages and the pressures of a career that often misunderstood him, Jay Silverheels found his true peace in the people who called him Dad. And though the world knew him as Tonto, those closest to him knew the real man, the father who loved deeply, cared quietly, and left behind not just a name in Hollywood, but a family that still carries his spirit today. Jay Silverheels' final days. What happened to the man who played Tonto will break your heart. Everyone remembers him as Tonto, the fearless companion who rode beside the Lone Ranger, loyal until the very end. But few know what happened to Jay Silverheels after the cameras stopped rolling. His final years were marked by pain, quiet strength, and a legacy that would outlive even Hollywood's memory of him. In 1976, Jay suffered a devastating stroke that changed everything. The once strong, athletic man who had spent his life riding horses, performing stunts, and commanding screens was suddenly fighting his toughest battle yet, his own body. It was a cruel twist of fate for someone who had spent his entire life defying odds and pushing boundaries. A year later, in 1977, his old friend and Lone Ranger co-star Clayton Moore paid tribute to him in a way that moved everyone who witnessed it. During the Pasadena Tournament of Roses parade, Moore rode an American paint horse in Jay's honor, a silent salute to the man who had stood by his side through every adventure. It was more than a tribute. It was a gesture of loyalty, friendship, and respect. But Jay's health continued to decline. On March 5, 1980, he passed away from another stroke at the age of 67 in Calabasas, California. The world lost a pioneer that day, a man who had carried the weight of representation long before Hollywood ever understood what it meant. Jay was cremated at the Chapel of the Pines Crematory, and his ashes were returned home to the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, the place where his story first began. There, among his people, his spirit was finally laid to rest. A cenotaph in his honor stands at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, a quiet reminder of the man who helped open doors for generations of Indigenous actors. Even after his passing, the world did not forget him. In 1979, a year before his death, Jay Silverheels received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 6538 Hollywood Boulevard, a recognition of the groundbreaking work he had done both on and off screen. Later, in 1993, he was inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. His hometown of Buffalo, New York also honored him, placing his portrait in Shea's Performing Arts Center as part of the Western New York Entertainment Hall of Fame. And his honors did not stop there. In 1997, he was posthumously inducted into the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame, not under his stage name, but under the one he used when he was just an athlete chasing dreams, Harry Tonto Smith. It was a full-circle moment, recognizing the side of him most people never saw, the competitor, the team player, the man who gave his all in everything he did. Even in pop culture, Jay's memory continued to echo. A fictionalized version of him appeared in the thrilling Adventure Hour's Tales from the Black Lagoon, a nod to his lasting impact on American storytelling. And then there was Milan Smith, Jay's close friend, horse trainer, and racehorse owner who made a promise to honor him in his own way. True to his word, he named a pacer Hi-Ho Silverheels, blending the famous call of the Lone Ranger with the name of the man who made it unforgettable. He may have ridden beside the Lone Ranger, but Jay Silverheels was never anyone's sidekick. He was a legend in his own right. After 70 years, Tonto Jay Silverheels' family confessed the dark truth about him. Jay Silverheels may have passed away in 1980, but his spirit never truly rode off into the sunset. Decades later, his grandson Jesse Silverheels is carrying that legacy across America, keeping alive the story of the man the world knew as Tonto, the Lone Ranger's loyal companion. At every event he attends, Jesse steps out wearing the same kind of buckskin outfit his grandfather once wore on screen, not as a gimmick, but as a tribute. He tells kids about the real Jay Silverheels, the man behind the stoic expression, the trailblazer who broke barriers and became the first Native American to ever play a major hero on television. During a recent appearance in Arizona, Jesse spoke about his mission with quiet pride. He reminded the audience that his grandfather was not just a TV character. He was a symbol of strength and perseverance, a man who opened doors in an industry that once refused to see Indigenous people as equals. "My grandfather was not just a character," Jesse said. "He was a trailblazer, the first Native American to play a major hero on television." With both Jay Silverheels and his co-star Clayton Moore, the original Lone Ranger, long gone, Jesse now stands as the last living public link to that legendary duo. To fans who grew up watching the show, seeing Jesse speak brings back a wave of nostalgia. But to younger generations, his appearances are something more. A history lesson, a reminder of how one man's courage helped change the way Native Americans were seen in Hollywood. The Silverheels legacy does not end there. Jay's son, Jay Silverheels Jr., also followed in his father's footsteps and found his own path in acting. Over the years, he has taken part in public events honoring his father's contributions and, like Jesse, worked to preserve his memory.
In 2009, an article described Jay Jr. as living a deeply spiritual life, dedicating himself to themes of forgiveness and healing. He often spoke about his father's strength and humility, sharing stories that revealed the heart of the man who once stood silently beside the Lone Ranger, not as a sidekick, but as a symbol of quiet power.
Together, the Silverheels family has done more than just protect a legacy. They have turned it into a living story. Jesse keeps the legend of Tonto alive for new generations, while Jay Jr. keeps the values behind the character, respect, forgiveness, and pride at the center of his message. And through them both, the spirit of Jay Silverheels rides on. The world may have known him as Tonto, but to his family and to those who still remember, he was something far greater, a pioneer who gave Native people a face in Hollywood and a name that time will never erase. Were you a fan of Jay Silverheels? Let us know in the comments below. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.